Imagine waking up tomorrow and paying double for fuel, double for groceries, double for heating your home. Not because of a recession, not because of a drought, but because two countries started fighting over a strip of water you've probably never heard of. That is not a hypothetical. That is happening right now. And while the world watches bombs fall on Iran, one man in Moscow is sitting back in his chair, looking at his bank statements and smiling. He didn't fire a single shot. He didn't send a single soldier. He didn't negotiate a single deal. He just waited. And the world delivered him exactly what he needed. In the next 9 minutes, you will find out exactly how and why almost nobody in power seems to have seen it coming. To understand this story, you need to understand one simple truth about the modern world. Oil is not just energy. Oil is control. Every factory that runs, every ship that sails, every flight that takes off, every hospital that stays lit, all of it depends on a steady, uninterrupted flow of crude oil. The country that can disrupt that flow doesn't need an army. It just needs patience. In April 2025, the United States launches a large-scale air campaign targeting Iran's nuclear program and military infrastructure. The stated objective is to eliminate the nuclear threat and pressure the Iranian government toward collapse. Strikes hit radar stations, missile depots, and command centers across the country in rapid succession. Iran does not fall, but something else does. Within hours of the first strike, maritime tracking systems light up with red alerts across the Persian Gulf. Shipping companies begin rerouting vessels, insurance providers suspend coverage for tankers entering the region. And the reason comes down to one place on the map, a narrow strip of water just 21 miles wide at its tightest point, the Strait of Hormuz. Every single day, roughly 20% of the world's entire oil supply passes through that strait. That includes oil from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Iraq, and Bahrain. There is no pipeline large enough to replace it. There is no alternative route fast enough to compensate. The strait is, in the plainest possible terms, the throat of the global economy, and Iran sits directly on its northern shore. The moment the strikes begin, oil prices start climbing. That always happens in a conflict. Markets respond to fear. Traders price in uncertainty. That is normal. But this time, analysts warn, the climb does not stop. Iranian forces begin threatening commercial tankers moving through the Gulf. Reports emerge that several vessels have already been struck. And then, something even more alarming surfaces. Intelligence sources suggest that Iran may be laying naval mines directly in the strait itself. Not missiles, not gunboats, mines, silent, invisible, drifting just below the surface. A captain on a supertanker carrying 2 million barrels of oil has no way to detect them until it is too late. So shipping companies do the only rational thing available to them. They stop sending ships. Suddenly, the Gulf states find themselves in a nightmarish situation. Saudi Arabia is pumping oil. The UAE is pumping oil. Kuwait is pumping oil. But no tanker will come to collect it. Production starts to slow. In some ports, according to reports, it stops entirely. The global oil supply now has a hole in it, a massive, growing, expensive hole. And one country has been quietly positioned to fill it for years. Russia. Vladimir Putin controls the world's second largest proven oil reserves. Russian oil does not move through the Strait of Hormuz. It flows westward through pipelines into Europe. It moves east through rail and pipeline toward China and India. It loads onto tankers in the Baltic and the Pacific, waters entirely untouched by anything happening in the Persian Gulf. Russian oil is available. It is flowing. And right now, with Gulf supply frozen by fear, it is suddenly worth significantly more money per barrel than it was a week ago. Every barrel Russia sells is now priced against a disrupted global market. The higher the crisis pushes oil prices, the more revenue flows into Moscow with every shipment. And according to analysts tracking energy markets, oil prices are climbing fast. But this, experts say, is only the beginning. There is a detail buried in the news that most viewers missed entirely. And it changes everything. According to reports from multiple outlets, the Trump administration quietly granted Russia a sanctions relief arrangement that allowed Russian crude to keep flowing to India, one of the world's largest and fastest-growing energy consumers. India had already been buying Russian oil at a discount since the Ukraine invasion. Now, with Gulf supply disrupted, India needs that Russian oil more desperately than ever. The discount disappears overnight. Russia charges market rate, and Russia collects. But India is not the only buyer scrambling for alternatives. Europe spent years publicly committing to end its dependence on Russian energy following the invasion of Ukraine. New LNG terminals were built, pipelines were rerouted, political agreements were signed. European leaders declared energy independence a matter of national security. And now, analysts warn, that entire effort faces a brutal stress test. American liquefied natural gas cannot fill the entire gap created by a frozen Persian Gulf. Alternative suppliers cannot scale fast enough, and Russian pipelines, already built, already connected, already proven, are still there, still flowing, still available. Publicly, European governments insist they will not return to Russian energy. But energy traders and policy analysts tracking the situation say the economic pressure on European consumers is building quickly. Prices are rising at the pump, in heating bills, in grocery stores, because energy is embedded in the price of almost every product that is manufactured, stored, or transported anywhere on Earth. Former national security officials who participated in contingency planning sessions on Iran over a decade ago have reacted to all of this with something close to grim recognition. Not surprise, recognition. Every serious war game ever run on a US-Iran conflict produced the same chain of consequences on page 1. Strike Iran. Iran threatens the Strait. Shipping stops. Oil prices spike. Russia wins. It was not classified intelligence. It was not a secret scenario. It was basic geography combined with basic economics, visible to anyone willing to look at a map. Now comes the part of this story that most channels are not covering. This war is not just a Middle East story, it is a Ukraine story. Before the Iran campaign began, American diplomatic and military attention was spread across multiple simultaneous priorities. Supporting Ukraine's defense against the Russian invasion, maintaining NATO solidarity, pressuring Moscow through sanctions and military aid, keeping European allies aligned on a unified response. The moment the Iran conflict ignites, all of that focus fractures. Military resources shift, political conversations change direction. The entire global news cycle gets consumed by one story. And inside the Kremlin, according to analysts who study Russian strategic planning, this kind of moment is exactly what years of patience has been waiting for. Russia does not need to fire a missile at a NATO soldier. It does not need to escalate in Ukraine. It simply needs to wait while America fights a war on a second front, while Europe scrambles for energy, and while the coalition that had been maintaining pressure on Moscow starts to strain under the weight of a second simultaneous crisis. Former Ambassador Michael McFaul has observed that the world is watching how America behaves in this moment, not just allies and partners, adversaries too. And what they are seeing, analysts argue, is an administration that launched a major military campaign without an apparent plan for what happens after the first bombs drop, without accounting for the strait, without a strategy for the mines, without preparation for the oil shock. That perception carries consequences that go far beyond the price of crude oil, because credibility is also a form of power. And right now, analysts warn, American credibility on the global stage is absorbing serious damage. The financial scale of what is unfolding is almost too large to visualize. The United States has reportedly spent over $10 billion on the campaign in its early weeks alone. The global economic cost of the disruption, in higher energy prices, halted shipping, frozen production, and diverted supply chains, is estimated by analysts to potentially exceed $100 billion and climbing. And here is the part that no one wants to say out loud. Even if a ceasefire were announced tomorrow, the damage does not stop. Restarting oil production across the Gulf takes weeks of preparation. Convincing shipping companies to return to a region that may still have mines in the water takes months of mine-clearing operations, inspections, and insurance recalculations. Months of elevated prices, months of disrupted supply, and months of Russia quietly collecting the difference with every barrel it sells into a market starving for alternatives. Putin does not need to negotiate. He does not need to threaten. He does not need to do anything except exist, pump oil, and wait. This is what patient geopolitical strategy looks like. You do not need to start the fire. You just need to make sure you are the only one selling water when the flames are rising. History does not always announce itself when it is happening. The people living through it rarely recognize the turning point in the moment. They see news reports, they see rising prices, they see contradictory statements from officials. But the deeper pattern, who benefits, who planned, who waited, only becomes visible later when someone takes the time to connect the pieces. This story is not about whether any nation's position is right or wrong. Every country in this conflict has a perspective rooted in real history, real security concerns, and real grievances. Those perspectives deserve to be understood, not dismissed. But this story is about something older than any of those grievances. It is about who profits from chaos. It is about the third player in every conflict, the one who did not start the fight and does not need to finish it, but who quietly collects the winnings while everyone else counts their losses. In 2025, in the conflict between the United States and Iran, the evidence strongly suggests that third player is Russia, and the cost is being paid by ordinary people, at petrol stations, in supermarkets, in energy bills, in almost every country on Earth. So here is the question we want to leave with you. Not a political question, a strategic one. When the decision to launch this campaign was made, do you believe anyone in the room asked, if this goes wrong, who wins? Tell us what you think in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, the ones that explain what is really happening behind the headlines, subscribe to Gulf War Deep and Dive. Because history is never what they teach you in school.